Thank you, Alan and Mitch. Next, we want to hear some stories from the immediate family. You know who you are. Yeah. So let's decide who's going to come up here first. Looks like we got Mom. Darcie's pointing at Mom. And then we're going to hear from Alan again. And then we're going to hear some stories from the rest of you. And we were going to be here till 3 in the morning, but the funeral home had another idea here. So come on up and let's hear.
You know all the dirt on it, you know the
Well, yes, I have known her longer. I am Debbie.
Talk to the microphone. Before you hand that.
I don't stand behind things either.
give her-
My
give her that
speech
one, too.
teacher in high school said, never go to a podium. No notes. Put your hands to your side. She didn't say straighten your sweater, but anyway. Thank you so much for coming. And welcome, welcome, welcome. Darcie was my sister, not only my biological sister, but my PEO sister, which is a special bond. And she was my friend. We were friends. Not always. No, there's 4 years difference. And according to my mother, well, this was sort of a nice thing to do. Well, do you remember there were baby buggies? I'm 71. And Darcie was in her baby buggy, and I went to the sandbox, and I grabbed the sand and all the toys, and I put them on top of her. She still survived. And then later in life, we were walking through a field somewhere, and I made all the grasshopper jump up and scare the living daylights out of her. And then when we got married, my husband and I got married, she was my maid of honor. She was highly annoyed. She had to wear a red dress. It was Christmas. And my mother threatened her with bodily harm. You behave and well, after we were married, and we'd been married like 1 year or something anyway, she came to live with us and go to college. And ever since then, we were very, very close. And you know, I could think I've got a lot of stories, and you could, your eyes would glaze over and go, But one thing, last night when I was chatting with some people, that they didn't know about my sister, and I think this is so appropriate to follow the beautiful song, which, by the way, I'd never heard. So thank you. My sister could sing. She had a voice. Our father darkened the church only 3 times. Well, but one was to see her as an angel in the Christmas pageant. And she belted out those hymns. Woo! So she sang well. We both took piano lessons on Sandy Bass from a lovely lady named Mrs. Simpson, who called and told my parents they were wasting their money, and they were. However, my sister could play the piano. Her very first recital, the Song of India, she started off in the wrong key and transposed it all. And Mrs. Simpson going, yeah. So not only could she sing and play the piano, but then she took up the guitar. And to make a little extra money in college, she played her guitar in bars. So I don't think a whole lot of people, maybe you all knew that. Maybe we should do conferences and go to the bar, yeah. But thank you for coming. And it's so, she would like this. Laughter was one of her great gifts. I think she has ridiculous medicine. And there's only water in here too. Oh my. Well, one of her gifts that I think was especially important is she had the gift of silence. She listened. And many people don't listen. Darcie did. And then from there, she reached out to you and everybody. So again, thank you. Thank you for that beautiful song. So, and I know I would hope there are a couple more stories, you don't want to just. But I got school instead.
Well, you've heard some stories from my beautiful wife about her beautiful sister. I'm the brother-in-law. And I'm going to tell you some things you probably didn't know about Darcie. Darcie was a tomboy when she was younger. She was her father's son. She hated dresses. She loved the Girl Scouts. She loved outdoors. She loved to go camping. She and 4 or 5 of her Girl Scout friends went on a wilderness expedition into the Gila Wilderness. And when we went down to pick her up at the trailhead, she came out looking like she hadn't had a bath in about a month. She probably hadn't. But the most interesting thing was the color of her language. And the second most interesting thing was that she had a box of Skoal chewing tobacco in her back pocket. Well, when she got home, her mother and her father probably had a good deal to do with changing both of those habits. Darcie had a interesting quirk too. She liked to bring home things, particularly stray animals and pets. She loved dogs. When she was a sorority sister in her sister's sorority in college, the Sigma Chi's had a bunch of baby ducks that they conned the girls into raising to see who could fatten the duck the fastest. And Darcie was living with us at the time. She brought home this little furry duckling, and I built a pen for it out in the garage, and I dug a hole for it in the backyard and filled it full of water. And she taught the duck to eat lettuce out of your hand, and she named him Petey. You may not know this, but mallard drakes do not quack, they peep. And so Petey went around the backyard going peep, 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 peep all the time. He never did learn to swim. Couldn't fly. Cats in the neighborhood hated him. Every time they came in the yard, he ran them off. And summer came up, and I had to go to my first duty station in Mesa Verde National Park, and we couldn't take Petey with us. So we called the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they came down and got Petey and took him to Bosque del Apache Wildlife Preserve down south of Albuquerque and let him go. And Petey had quite a harem, I guess, for several years. He was the biggest duck on the pond. When Darcie and Tony lived up on the peninsula in Michigan, they got a little puppy. He was one of those oddball dogs that she just fell in love with. And he was brown, and he was white, and he was half poodle, and he was half water spaniel. And Alicia called him PJ because he looked like peanut butter and jelly. Well, PJ got traded around the family for years. He lived with all of us at one time or another, but he eventually ended up at Deborah's father's home. He was a widower then, and he and PJ bonded like that. Well, when PJ died, the colonel just couldn't quite handle that, so he cremated the dog and had kept him on the mantle. And that became a family tradition of cremating people and putting him on the mantle, but that's another story. When the colonel died, he too was cremated. And he was taken to Fort Logan National Cemetery at Denver. And when the military contingent came out to do the ceremony, on the bier there were 2 boxes. One was the bigger box, and one was the smaller box, and they were stacked one on top of the other. And the young major who was in charge of the proceedings came up and he asked Darcie, he said, "Why are there 2 boxes on the bier?" And she looked at him and she said, "My father was a very large man." Today, PJ and the colonel are resting happily in Fort Logan National Cemetery. When Darcie and Tony had a little boy and he became very ill, they eventually brought him down to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital at Denver. And they had so much to do trying to save that baby's life that they sent Allie to live with us at Mesa Verde National Park. And she came and lived with Deborah and I and our 2 sons. And she was terrorized by her cousins. We had a Mexican coffee table that had spindles all the way around it. It looked like a cage. And the boys used to put Allie underneath the coffee table and sit on it until someone came and rescued her screaming little body from underneath the table. But I think that made her tough. And she's got that same toughness that her mother has. The ability to deal with adverse conditions under any circumstances and get the most out of everything. Well, those are a few stories about Darcie you probably didn't know. But she was my friend too. She's a good lady. And we're going to miss her. Thank you.
I really wasn't going to say anything, but I did notice something most peculiar. We, when putting this together, were concerned that we'd have like 1 row of us sitting in the front because we're not from here. We didn't go to school here. We've only been here for a very short time. And I was looking out here and I know every face in the room, I think. Because Darcie was in so many different communities, from the TAPS to the TCF to my Rotary family to bands to local, national, international, and it was sometimes hard to keep track of her. I had to usually, somebody would ask where Darcie is, and I would get up, take the phone, go ahead and look at the calendar and say, let's see, it's today. I think she's in Kansas City. Which was a little embarrassing because, well, that trip I planned 3 or 4 months before, so that day was really done for me. And today is sort of like she's gone to Kansas City. And she'll probably be back on Thursday or Friday. But this is such a family. And thank you all for letting me be a part of it. I think somebody with a cheese head wanted to talk up here.
Okay, I don't usually wear this to funerals. Alright, the Packers, as some of you may know, is my grandma's favorite football team. And every time she would go to Wisconsin, she would get a new Packers thing. So I have a lot more Packers gear. Alright, so stories. Alright, I should probably start with my favorite story. My grandma really needed, you guys know the app Shazam that like listens to the clips of music and then tells you what the song is. Well, my grandma really needed that. We got her an iPod like 5 years ago, and she only wanted one song, but she didn't know the name of the song. She knew like 3 words. And while she may have been a good singer sometimes, but when she didn't know, when she didn't know the song, it was kind of bad. And it was Christmas. Yeah, it was Christmas. And we were sitting at the table with the computer and had iTunes on it. And my mom, who's the iTunes person, was trying to find the song. And she only knew like 3 words. And she was like something about a back door and lights. And so it took us like 3 hours to figure out which song it was. But we finally figured out the song. But my grandma really needed Shazam to help her because that would have saved all of our ears. So. And then, I don't know if you guys know this, I know my grandma used the crab hats for some things in her things, her speaking engagements. That's what they're called. But there's a personal story with those too. So there are 2 crab hats over there. There's a really nice looking one, and then there's like a less nice but still nice looking one. So the one in the middle that looks less nice is the crabby hat number 1. We called them the crabby hats. So when I was little, my grandma's name was Grandma, not Darcie. My name was Darcie, and she told me that her name was also Darcie, and I did not want to share my name. That was my name. So I had a little bit of a fit, and she went to Seattle and got these, right? Yeah, I don't know. And so she put that on me because I was being crabby, so that was a crabby hat. A couple minutes later, I was in my office. At the grief store, they had a room that was an office for Darcie, my grandma, but I kind of took it over and she was gone. So when she came back, she told me that's my office too. And I had the crabby hat on for whatever reason, and she told me that I had to share a name and an office with her, and I lost it. So crabby hat number 1 is a little broken. She went back to Seattle, I don't know why. I mean, Seattle's great, sorry. And she got the second hat, and I can't see when I had that hat on, so the crabby hat number 2, she put it on me whenever I was crabby or whatever, and I ran into things because I couldn't see over the crabby hat. So I don't know how she used those in her speaking engagements, but that's the personal story behind the crabby hats. All right, thank you guys for coming. I know it means a lot to my family and everybody here, so thank you.
I suspect I will need this. And I'm about to break a Darcie and actually an Allie speaking rule by standing at a podium and looking at notes, but perhaps you'll forgive me because it's this day. And we'll see if I can get through it. You know Darcie Sims, you know the Darcie Sims, you know Dr. Darcie Sims, but don't call her that because she gets pissed, and that's a medical term. She's my mom. She's mom. And she's Badger, and we'll get to that. She was, I think you can get the sense, she was simply everything to our family. Simply everything. My mom was born to a military family, and they moved. She knew how to pack up a whole house in one day without a single thing being broken or lost. The only things that got lost, by the way, were things that she deemed perhaps it was time to go, and those got lost in the move. I only discovered later that lost in the move really meant she donated them to Goodwill or threw them out. I learned this because when I became a mom and we were moving and I was saying, oh, I hate the Wiggles guitar, and she said, well, it could always get lost in the move, and suddenly I understood. Sorry. Someone else really enjoyed the Wiggles guitar, I'm certain, but I did not. but my mom had this thing, and I think this is a lesson for us, and that's why I chose to share this story with you, and that's that for my mom, a move always had two parts. The first part involved grieving the loss. It involved, as we're driving away, saying goodbye, and not goodbye like I'm never going to see you again, but goodbye, I don't live here anymore. And I did have to pack up all this stuff, and I lost the gosh darn Wiggles guitar, or whatever it was that I wanted. The first part was about grieving the loss of what we were leaving behind. And somewhere around halfway, and I don't know if she did the math to figure out what was halfway or not, but somehow around halfway, there was a change. And we started talking about adventure. And we started talking about this new place, about where we were going to go. And my mom, they didn't have Google back then. I have no idea how she did her research, but that woman did homework. And she would say, do you know that this amazing thing that I didn't think was all that amazing happened 1,000 years ago here? That's probably not 1,000 years ago, but it seemed like that. Did you know that this new place we're going to, they have the world's largest ball of twine, and we are going to go see it, right? As soon as we unpack, we are going to go see it, and it's going to be so awesome. It's a ball of twine. But somehow, hearing the stories that my mom was telling, she could paint a vivid picture with those stories as she's talking about imagining the people in those frontier families as they're riding across the plains where we're driving right now. But they were in a covered wagon and they didn't have a stereo system. And boy, was it awesome for us, not so much for them. And here's that battlefield. And do you know let's stop and look and pretend to fight the battle. And how could you not jump on that bandwagon with my mom? And by the time we got to wherever it was we were going, it was a new adventure. It was exciting and fun, amazing. So right now we're at the beginning. We're at that part where we're driving away from the neighborhood and we're saying, gosh, I really hope my friends keep in touch. And I'm gonna miss this and I'm gonna miss that, and all I can think about is counting what I'm gonna miss. But somewhere along the middle of this road, and I don't know what day it's gonna be and I don't know where, but it's gonna look like you guys. We're gonna start talking about the adventure. We're gonna figure out what that looks like. And it's gonna be bringing her along, because that's the other thing, is we're gonna honor where we've been. And we know we're always better for where we've been. But we're gonna board up our wagon train. And we're gonna ride through a Civil War battlefield, and we're gonna get there. And when we're there, I don't think it's the world's biggest ball of string or ball of twine, but there's something there, and I'll figure it out on Google. And when I know, and when you know, we'll communicate with each other. And we'll share. She taught us resilience. She modeled it, even in our darkest moments. My mom had that way of listening, of really hearing, really being there in that moment with you, hearing where you were, and the second half of the road. By the time you were done talking with my mom, you felt heard, you felt cared for, and you had a better idea of where we were headed and what we needed to do to get there. And by the time we got there, you knew how to unpack everything in one day like she did and have tea ready for the general by the end of the week. My mom had another gift, and I think you've heard a little bit about that. She had a million ideas of her own. In fact, if you spent any time with her at all, you heard a lot of brainstorming, and some of them were awesome, and some of them were just plain weird. And the weird ones are the ones we love the most, and why do you think we're all wearing toilet paper? A hard worker and perfectionist herself, she never asked anyone to do something she wasn't willing to do or hadn't done herself. It was pretty hard to tell that woman no because of that, because she was asking me to do half of what she was doing. Heck yeah, I gotta do that. No guilt trip, just you knew. You just knew her. You knew what she was doing, and you knew what she was capable of, and that she's asking you to do this one small thing. Sure. She changed the language of how we talk to each other. Her big thing was to change the language of grief, from talking about losing people to talking about that they died, to saying, instead of I ought to have done this or I should do this, strike those words from our vocabulary. She helped us understand that the word closure at a funeral is about the casket, not about what the family gets or needs. Pretty cool stuff. I had no idea. Many of us didn't. She helped us to use real words and to interact with the world in a real way. You guys, a lot of you know that part. But you don't know this other capacity, and there are some young ladies, and I would like all 4 of them to stand up for a moment. My C4 Girl Scout troop. And I brought Miss Darcie's badge sash here today to embarrass her. No, because this badge sash would not exist. You talk about what would happen if Darcie Sims wasn't around. Well, one, I wouldn't be around, and Darcie wouldn't be around, but this badge sash wouldn't be around either. And it's not just because my mom can sew and I can't, which is true. It's because Darcie was Badger. And I'm not talking about the small furry animal. I'm talking about the woman who said every single time, you guys, what'd she say? There's a... I'm sorry, they have to hear the story. There's a what? There's a badge for that. No matter what we were doing, that woman had a badge for that. I'm sure there's a badge for this. But she's my research person, so you got to give me a couple of minutes in time and we'll figure it out. I don't know what that was. So it's not just that she sewed everything on here, and my God, I'm going to have to learn how to sew. She said, these are extraordinary young women and they do amazing things. And you know what? They should have as many little patches on their vests as everybody else. In fact, quite honestly, they have a heck of a lot more than everybody else in every event we go to. And that was a source of great pride for Badger, by the way. And she loved that troop. She loved those girls. She loved spending time with you. She loved being a mentor and a teacher. She loved helping you find what was special about you and grow that into something. She had no interest whatsoever in creating many Darcie Sims out there in the world. She wanted to find the Alan Petersons and the Mitch Carmondys and the Cassidy Slaughters and the Laura Wardemans and Maddie Gish and the Darcy Franklin, and go be who that is and make the world a better place because of who you are. And her gift was to be a catalyst. She said, I don't change people's lives, and I know people say that all the time. You changed my life. I talked to you in the elevator for 5 minutes. I've known you for 100 years. You've changed my life. And my mom would say, I don't. That's not what I do. My job is to hear you, to find what works in you, and to help you take that forward, to be who you are, to make the world a better place based on who you are, not who I am. She was playful, and you'll hear some stories about playful, but I will say one quick one, because I don't want to take up the whole time. My mother was a water magnet. We would go, so she worked hard, you know that. She played hard too. When we went whitewater rafting, and I mean on the amusement park rides, it didn't matter what seat she sat on those little circular things. We're headed towards a waterfall. It looks like Dad's gonna get it, and instantly the thing twists and my mother is soaked. We're going down what looks like a big rapid. I'm facing backwards. I'm totally gonna get wet. Everybody knows it. It's finally gonna be my turn to get soaked, right? The thing has a wave that goes up and over my head and splashes across the aisle on Darcie Sims. Every time we would warn strangers when they would join us because we weren't a big enough family to take up an entire circular raft. And we would say, don't sit next to her. If you want to get wet, here is the place. But if you don't want to get wet, you should get off this raft. It's going badly for you. And it was so much fun. And when we went whitewater rafting, the real one, with the women of thanatology, I told you, Heidi, I'd share this story. There was a Women of Grief leadership retreat that we went to 3 years in a row, and we got on a whitewater raft trip with the mother of thanatology, Hannah-Laura Wass, who happened to be 75. What a brave woman to go whitewater rafting with us, with my mother who gets wet on every ride. And we were on rapids that were supposed to be class 3, and we went around a bend and the riverbank had swollen, and it was a class 4, and it bumped out the guide and every single human being in the raft except my mother, Hannah-Laura Wass, and me. My mother and I are in the front of the raft, and we hear this tiny little voice from this woman we admire and we've learned so much from, saying, Darcie and Ellie, we're all alone. And my mom and I looked at each other, not a word was said. Not one word was said. And instantly we knew what had happened. She stayed in the front, and she was the bowsman, and she powered through it. And I was in the back as the stern, and I steered us to safety. And the 3 of us made it to the edge. And the other people, by the way, were fished out and quite wet. My mother was not the wettest person on that ride. And the next time we got together, everyone said, we want to ride with the warriors. We want to ride with the warriors. And I was like, what the heck? We were the wild women warriors. And they had to draw straws to see who was getting on the raft the next time because everybody wanted to be in our raft and it can only hold so many people. And there was hooping and hollering and singing and dancing and everything else. I did forget to tell you one thing about the Girl Scouts, and that is that my mother knows every single Girl Scout song that was ever written, that ever happened. If you need a song about prunes, underwear, or dirty socks, she's your gal. She knows a perfect song, and she can do it. And she'll teach it to you. And these girls know it. So if you need a song about prunes, underwear, or dirty socks, here are your resources. I can feel her with us. I can feel her with us today. And even now, I'm just going to read this part, guys. Even now, as it is so hard to imagine how we will move forward in this world without her physical presence, I know we will because we are together. Because we are a family, all of us in this room, whether you knew each other before you walked in the room or not. Because we'll do what she taught us to do, which is to have our roots grow inward towards one another, to form a bond that can never be broken, not by anything, not by death, not by this thing that's happened to us, not by where we are. I'm going to borrow some words from my mom for a second, because they fit here. She said, we are a family circle, broken by death, mended by love. All right, Mom, we got to figure that one out. Today we feel broken by the immense loss that brings us all here, the loss brought on by our death. Our work here today is to remember the love as we find a way, as this circle of friends and family, as we learn how to mend our hearts so we can carry the spark that she found in each of us forward to light the world. Thanks, Mom. I love you.